It's a very complicated system in order to have the perfect balance of receptivity in the insulin receptors on every cell so that we have good glucose control and we have good support. Good fats can be good, bad fats can be bad. Welcome back to Metabolic Health Solutions, where we empower health practitioners and self-healers to heal themselves and heal their patients and clients with metabolic imbalances. I'm Dr. Ritamarie Loscalzo. I'm a functional nutrition practitioner. I'm the founder of the Institute of Endocrinology, and I'm the author of the book Unstoppable Health. Today, I want to talk to you about the benefit of including high amounts of fat in a diet designed to reverse insulin resistance. When it comes to fat in the diet, there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of misinformation. Some folks say that the high amounts of fat are great, like a ketogenic diet is like the cure-all for insulin resistance. But others, mainly plant-based doctors, are saying that fat is the curse and the bane of insulin resistance, that the fat somehow plugs up the insulin receptors. And I have tried really hard to find evidence of that. And what I find is not all fats are alike. And when you look at the studies where high amounts of fat in the diet are worsening insulin resistance, it's actually because it's high amounts of calories in the diet that then get converted into fat. And they're not looking at the quality of the fat. They're looking at feeding people the types of fat that most people eat. The conventional standard American diet, which is eating processed fats, hydrogenated fats, oxidized fats, heated fats, fats that are damaging, and an abundance of omega-6 compared to omega-3. So these are all the things that need to be taken into account when designing a diet to help reverse insulin resistance. Metabolic health is a problem in our Western world. It's starting to be a problem in our indigenous cultures as well, as they adopt a more Western diet. And fat is a problem. Bad fats are a problem. Good fats are not a problem. And so the problem in our society, the problem with our medical system, the problem with the advice people are given is that it lumps fat as an ingredient. Like all fats are created equal, and they're not. So we really need to be looking at the quality of fat. So insulin resistance develops when we're eating a highly processed diet, when we're eating a lot of carbohydrates that cause the body to need insulin in order to get the sugar into the cells. And when we eat a lot of that stuff, whether it's sugar in its ugliest form or high fructose corn syrup, or bread, pasta, those kinds of starches that can quickly metabolize. And even for some people, grapes and papaya, unfortunately, and mangoes and things like that, that are high sugar fruits, in some people can cause that high level of sugar in the blood, which creates a need for insulin and high levels of insulin getting created. It's the high levels of insulin over time that cause those receptors to get burned out, that cause the insulin receptors to become resistant. But it's more than just that. It's also the toxicity in our diets, toxins that are in our food, all the preservatives and additives and colors, toxins that are in the environment even that get into the system. They damage the receptors, they damage the insulin receptors, and then the insulin receptors can't work, and we develop insulin resistance. Fats, when they're in the wrong quantity and the wrong proportion, can also damage that. So we need a good balance of omega-3, which are anti-inflammatory fats, compared to omega-6, which are more inflammatory fats. And the average diet in our society is way higher in omega-6 than in omega-3. And so we're getting a preponderance of inflammation, which then inflammation damages the insulin receptors. So it's not a simple process. It's not so simple as don't eat sugar or don't eat fat or eat a lot of fat or eat a lot of whatever. It's a very complicated system in order to have the perfect balance of receptivity in the insulin receptors on every cell so that we have good glucose control and we have good support. Good fats can be good, bad fats can be bad. There is a common misconception that there's a set perfect ratio of fat, protein, carbohydrate that's good for everyone. That macro ratios, and a lot of people are focusing on macro ratios. The truth of the matter is there is no one perfect ratio because everybody's a little bit different. And just like not everybody can wear a size 8 shoe, not everybody can benefit from a 40% fat or an 80% fat or a 10% fat diet. It's very individualized. And what plays into that are genetics, prior exposures. Like, did you eat candy bars your whole life? Did you drink Kool-Aid like I did when you were a kid? Did you eat a lot of candy? There's a lot of things like that. So when we look at fat, we have to look at fat as an important nutrient. Fat has been demonized as, oh my God, it's evil, but fat's an important nutrient. A very high percentage of the brain is made of fat. The sheets that go around the nerves that help to carry the nerve transmissions from the brain to the rest of the body, fat. The sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, are all made from fat, from cholesterol as a precursor, right? So we can't demonize fat, just like we can't demonize protein and we can't demonize carbohydrate. We can look at it as we need the right kinds of fats for body repair, for brain function, and for hormone function. So we need all of those fats in the right proportion to have good receptivity on those insulin receptors. They need to have the anti-inflammatory fats versus the inflammatory. Now, doesn't mean that omega-6 fats are bad fats. It's when omega-6s far exceed the omega-3s that it becomes a problem. We need omega-6s. We need omega-3s. We need all of these things. The things we don't need are hydrogenated fats and oxidized fats because those are inherently damaging for pretty much everybody. So in terms of omega-3, where do we get that from? Well, a lot of people push fish as a good source. Fish contains EPA and DHA, good source of omega-3s. But there's some concerns about the quality of fish and the safety of eating fish because of the high levels of PCBs and mercury and lead and other things that are in the oceans. But in lieu of that, fish is a good source of omega-3s. Sea vegetables are a good source of omega-3s. And most people don't go around saying, have you had your seaweed yet today? Have you eaten your algae yet today? Have you had your spirulina today? Those are good sources. Wild edibles, wild greens that grow out and that people mostly buy Roundup to kill, those can be a good source, especially one called purslane. It's got a like lemony kind of flavor and can be added to salads. And then there's other things that are good omega-3s, which are hemp seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts. Those are all good sources of omega-3s. There's a lot of prejudice against these sources. They're plant-based sources because they are what's called short chain fats. And in order for them to be elongated into their versions, the EPA and DHA that are anti-inflammatory and that help with insulin receptivity, we have to have good status in our body of the particular enzyme. Those enzymes, the enzyme in particular I'm thinking about is called delta 6 desaturase. It requires a whole bunch of nutrients in order to activate, to actually work properly. The majority of our Western world, our Western population, eats processed and refined foods, which are missing most of those nutrients. B vitamins, boron, zinc, vitamin C, magnesium, all of these things are really important to be able to convert the fats in flax seeds and chia seeds, which are a phenomenal source, into EPA and DHA. So plus there's some genetic variants that can make a person a little less able to do that. But those are basically what we need to be eating in order to have good cell membrane function, good sex hormone function, and guess what? Good insulin function. One of my favorite fat sources is avocado. Why? Because it tastes good. I just love it, right? Mix it up with some lemon juice and some tomatoes and onions and whatnot, and it makes a great guacamole. It's one of my favorite foods, but it does not contain omega-3. It contains very little, if any, omega-6. What it is a monounsaturated fat. So it's a neutral fat. Some studies indicate that the monounsaturated fats are actually good for cardiac health. Olive oil, olives are one of the most studied of those. So avocado is actually a good source of fat, but also contains some chemicals in it that have been shown to help restore the sensitivity of the cells to insulin. So avocado is one of my favorites. I had a client years ago, and she had, people hear these diets, and that was back in the low fat days. And she was trying to do this low fat diet, and she was eating way too many carbs, and she couldn't lose weight. So I took her off the carbs, and she wanted to eat avocado. She goes, I'm like eating 2 or 3 avocados a day. Is that too much? I'm like, are you gaining weight? She goes, no, I'm losing weight. She was like, keep on eating them. She got to a point where she didn't want 2 or 3 avocados a day. So whatever was in there, something was helping her body. But the point is, weight loss resistance had set in before this. She started eating a lot of avocados, lots of fat, and boom, her weight started dropping. Why? I believe because she got her insulin under control. Yeah. So when we look at the fat in avocados and we look at the mechanisms by which insulin resistance comes about, the problem with insulin resistance is usually too many of the carbs that get quickly into the system and not enough nutrients to support transport of insulin into the cells and a whole bunch of other things. When we displace the carbs, so we displace the bread and the pasta and the white rice and even the brown rice for a lot of folks with other calories like avocado, which is high in fat, and people are going, I don't eat fat. We actually see a difference because lowering of the carbs helps with not producing so much insulin, not needing to produce so much insulin. The specific metabolic components of the avocado, there are specific chemicals in there that help to improve the sensitivity of the cells to insulin. The only other fat source that I consume on a fairly regular basis that has a lot of controversy around it is coconut. So coconut is a source of saturated fat. And many folks in the plant-based community, which I'm part of, I've been plant-based for 40 years, so I'm not anti-plant-based, but plant-based doctors are often saying don't eat coconut or don't eat too much coconut because it's high in saturated fats, and saturated fats have been shown to contribute to heart disease, high LDLs, et cetera, et cetera. But when I look at that, when I look at the studies, it's going to be varying depending on the person. So genetically, some people have a particular variant, ApoE4, ApoE44 or ApoE43. And when they have that, there's a deficit in the mechanism for transporting the saturated fats out of the cells and out of the body, and it can build up and it can be problematic. So for people who have that genetic variant, I say be careful with coconut, but also don't eat saturated animal fats. Don't eat butter, don't eat steak, minimize the intake of chicken or poultry because it's high in saturated fat. So eating fish for those people is probably the only animal foods that they can get away with without compromising their health. But eating coconut, might be okay in small amounts. We just have to watch. Like some people, when they hear about coconut or olives being healthy, or even avocado, everybody thinks about oil. Let's have avocado oil, let's have olive oil, let's sprinkle olive oil over everything. But you know what? Olive oil is a refined food, just like white flour is. We're taking the oil, the fat, out of a whole plant that also has carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, and protein. Not a tremendous amount of protein, but it's there. And we're pulling it out, but we somehow think that oils are a health food. Olive oil, yeah, I don't eat olive oil. I eat olives. Do I never eat olive oil? Well, if I'm out and I'm eating something, I'm not like so strict about it like I would be about gluten and dairy and eggs, which I'm definitely allergic to, or hydrogenated oils. There's things I will not touch. Olive oil on a salad, periodically. Yeah, but I don't use it as a thing. Same with coconut oil. I eat coconut. I don't eat coconut oil. Do I occasionally have a little bit of coconut oil? Sure. But it's not something that's a health food. And when people hear, oh, coconut has all this great benefit, they're talking coconut oil and then they're overdoing on oil, which is a fractured and refined food. I want to say one more thing about coconut. We talked earlier about the fact that we need to elongate our short chain. And when I use my hands when I'm talking about this stuff, it's because I see biochemical pathways in my brain. So I'm seeing these short chain fats way up here, and then the long chains down here, and then that delta 6 desaturates and all the great nutrients we need to convert. Well, coconut particular, one of the fats in there called stearic acid is been found to increase the conversion rate in some cases by tenfold. So I always tell people, have a little bit of coconut with your flax seeds and your chia seeds and your hemp seeds and your walnuts, so that you're better able to convert those into the long chain DHA and EPA. And then you're not having to worry about the mercury and the PCBs if you're doing fish or fish oils. Going into what fats are bad, that I would say don't ever eat them or avoid them as much as you can, like the plague, would be fats that have been oxidized, fats that have been hydrogenated. So what's hydrogenated mean? Well, hydrogenation is a process of inserting hydrogen into a fat to make it have more of these double bonds so that it gets more saturated at room temperature. So for example, Crisco is this gross stuff that used to be used very widely in baking and making cakes and all this, and pie crusts. Crisco, I would say stay away from Crisco. Mayonnaise, your typical mayonnaise. There are some mayonnaises that may be made without hydrogenated oils these days, but it's usually partially hydrogenated soybean oil. Stay away from it. Margarine, the same thing. Partially hydrogenated soybean oil or corn oil or whatever other kinds of oil they may use for that. You want to avoid those oils. They have been shown, they're even been I don't know that it's quite banned is the word for it, but they have been discouraged, the use of that in products, and people are looking for that. So stay away from hydrogenated oils. But the other is oils that have been heated and processed, and the oils become oxidized. When the oils become oxidized, they become unstable and they produce what's called free radicals. The free radicals damage our cells, including our insulin receptors. So we want to be careful about that. So what is that? Well, if you take safflower oil that says, cold pressed safflower oil, first of all, it probably isn't cold pressed because it can go up all the way up to like 180 degrees and it's damaging the bonds in there and it becomes unstable. But even if it was, let's just say flax oil, cold pressed flax oil. You have that and it says it's cold pressed and it has a pressing date and it looks really good. You keep it in your refrigerator, you pour it into a frying pan, you turn on the heat and you throw some veggies or whatever you throw into it to stir fry. As soon as that flax oil goes above 120 degrees, which it will in your frying pan, it becomes oxidized, it becomes unstable, and it becomes unhealthy, and it can cause damage to your cells. So it's really important that if we're going to use oils and foods with oils in them, that we don't heat them, that we eat them in their pure natural state. So olives are a great food. Olive oil, it can be heated to a higher temperature than flax, like I think 220 degrees before that damage happens. But mostly when you put it in a pan, it's going up way higher than that, right? Same thing, coconut has a much higher heat point, but still, it's a safer oil to cook with, but it's not 100% safe. But any of the polyunsaturated oils, corn oil, safflower oil, canola oil, all of those oils, those are all damaged as soon as you heat them up. So we want to be careful and we want to avoid that. Most of those are going to be damaged before you even heat them up because they were heated up at the factory, the place where they were extracted and put into the bottle. A lot of folks are talking about using butter. The keto diet, I call the keto diet the butter and bacon diet, because most people are just like touting the benefits of butter and bacon. Butter is, again, a processed food. It's the oil extracted from dairy, whether it's usually it's cow's dairy. Sometimes it might be sheep or goat or whatever else, but most of the time it's cow. And it's extracted. So it's a processed food. It's just the oil component. We're taking it away from the way nature intended it to be. People are touting tallow. Tallow is beef fat. It's extracted. Lard is pig fat, right? We're having people are cooking in this stuff, and it's just the fat from those animals, right? So there's no protein. Most animal products don't have carbohydrate to speak of. Dairy does have carbohydrate in the form of lactose. So when we pull that out, we're just doing pure fat. And I don't believe that eating pure animal fat is a healthy thing to do. There's a lot of people out there who will disagree with me and say that it is. I don't think it's a healthy thing to do. In addition to it just being pure fat, and we can argue till the cows come home, pun intended, about the benefits and the risks of eating pure animal fat and whether or not that saturated fat is the contributing factor to cancer, heart disease, and the other diseases, the inflammatory diseases we have. But the problem is it's just the pure fat. We're throwing away the protein. We're throwing away the rest of the nutrients that are in that. I don't believe it's a good idea. Now, from a standpoint of safety, when it comes to oxidation, you can heat those up much higher, kind of like coconut. It's a saturated fat. So the temperature at which you can heat it up is higher than a vegetable fat in terms of where the damage happens. So it's safer that way. I just don't think it's a safe food overall. There's so much that goes into our overall health, and metabolic health is super important for just about every disease going, as is the health of the microbiome. And those guys are connected. So in order to have a good microbiome, that's a gut, the bacteria that live in the gut, we need to have good metabolic health. In order to have good metabolic health, we have to have a good microbiome. And so all of these things play in together. So we put together an event that we're doing called ReInvent 2025. And it's about the genetics and the lab testing related to microbiome balance and how that affects metabolic health and brain health. So we'll put a pinned comment down below with the link to that. We'll also put it in the description and the show notes. So you can access this event, and it's geared towards health practitioners, but it's also, we get a lot of people who are self-practitioners who want to know the in-depth. So when we look at who's well suited for the higher fat diet versus a lower fat diet, who's going to benefit the most and who should use caution when adding more fats, whether it's for insulin resistance or just in general overall weight gain, weight loss, etc. We need to look at several classes of people. So number one, if you have had your gallbladder removed or you have gallbladder issues, you've been told you have gallstones, you have to be careful about the fats that you're eating. Now, you can take digestive enzymes with it. You can take bile acids with it. That's a story for another video of how to approach that, but that's who needs to be really cautious. Other folks that need to be cautious about including the extra fat are people with the ApoE44 genetics or the ApoE43 genetics, and that's more careful with regards to saturated fat. They generally are going to be okay with the unsaturated fats. But there are other genetic factors that we'll talk about or that will inform how well we're going to process our fats. If you're a person who, when you eat high amounts of fats, you feel nauseous, you don't feel good, that's an indication too. Our bodies are our best lab. We have to look at how does this respond in the body. So like I said, there's not just one approach. I think with the insulin resistance, the good fats help with the insulin sensitivity, but it's really getting rid of the foods that require higher levels of insulin in order to pull out the nutrients from them. And that would be a lot of the carbs, especially the refined carbs, the sugars, and the sugar type products. If you want to learn more about insulin resistance, click my video to the right. I'm Dr. Ritamarie, and I'll see you there.